Now here's the location for that spin-on filter. Now the one with the neck that goes up in here, there's actually a seal. So a metal ring with a rubber seal around it that gets tapped up into the front pump. That's part of the front pump. Now we need to get that out so we can replace the seal. And what I like to use is just a 1/2 inch extension. And I can kind of get up in there just right, catch the edge of it, and start prying it out. I don't want to mar up this opening at the pump and the seal are. I want it to be removed carefully, and there we go. That is the old seal, and the new one, I'll show you how I get that in. So when you get your replacement filter, and this is a Mopar one here, inside you have your new filter, and then further inside there's some instructions, and then finally a nice little seal that we're going to be using. Now, like I said, what I like to do to install this seal is I get me 3/8 drive extension, find me a socket that's about the same size as the seal, turn it upside down where I got the flat portion, and I'm going to tap it up in there. I'm going to use this as a driver until it bottoms out. And that's my way of getting it up in there. So I'll work on getting this thing seated first. And once it's seated, I'll come back, a couple gentle taps. As I go up, I'll stop, look at it, and there we go. Now we got that seal completely flush, and now we're ready to put that filter on. So when you go back with the spin-on filter, it's got a plastic threaded portion, so be careful when you're lining it up. Make sure it's lined up properly first before you try to tighten it down, because if it's not, those plastic threads can strip. So definitely make sure you got it right. If it binds up, back it off and try it again. Now you're just going to go hand tight on this, just like an oil filter. Wait till it bottoms out and just snug it up. You don't have to use no tools on this. And then we'll move on to the other filter as well. Now what I like to do before I install it is to put a little bit of transmission fluid on here. I guide it up in the hole to the front pump. I do the same kind of motion I did as I was taking it out. Just do some gentle side to sides while I'm pushing up. And then once I get it close to lining up, I'll go ahead and start that T25. I don't tighten it all the way, I get it close. Because what I like to do is a gentle tap right here. Make sure it's fully seated. And once it is, then I can go ahead and finish tightening this down. That way when I back it off and leave it a little loose, it has a tendency to slide as I tap it and get fully seated properly. And then I can tighten it down to be done. Now that we got the filters in place, we'll go ahead and start cleaning up the pan and get ready to install it on the transmission. Let's go ahead and we need to clean the trans pan off before we go back to putting our bead of RTV on it and installing it. Now, I clean up all the excess, I scrape it down real good, and I clean it with some brake clean. I don't go down to bare metal because I'm about to put another coat of RTV on. I do like to get all the old RTV off the best I can, and that has worked for me over the years without spending too much time getting it down to nice shiny metal. If you want to do that, that's your business. Now, if it comes with a replacement trans pan gasket, definitely get it down to fresh metal. That way you don't have no excess RTV that's going to cause that gasket not to sit properly. But at the dealership, the recommended procedure is to use RTV and not a gasket, but the aftermarkets do different things. So I'm going to go around the edge, clean up the best I can. I'm going to use a couple can brake clean and get it down to nothing in the pan anymore and get it ready for its bead of RTV. Now we pretty much got everything cleaned up inside, outside, and around the gasket for RTV surface. We're going to let it dry for a second, let it evaporate. And it helps if you go ahead and wipe everything down and get the excess off. It'll evaporate a lot faster. And then we'll move on to getting the RTV around the perimeter. When you go with your RTV, so that you don't put too much RTV on there, I mean, you need to put enough to seal, but you don't need enough to where you get blobs of it hanging off. It's determined by the size of the hole that you cut on your RTV nipple there. Based off of that, it's going to be about the size that you're going to get as far as the bead coming out. Now I'm just going to go around the edge. I'm going to circle each one of the bolts and continue all the way around until I made a complete circle. I'm just going to start a bead, work it around. Like I said, you're going to go around the bolts, where the bolt hole goes, excuse me, and just kind of work your way down. Go all the way around the perimeter like this. Alright, now that we're finished with the RTV, now we can walk back over to the vehicle. We'll wipe the surface of the transmission where the pans will make contact, and we'll go ahead and start starting the bolts on this. Now go around the perimeter. Like I said, give it a good wipe down. If you see any excess RTV still stuck to the transmission, make sure you wipe that off or scrape it off, whatever you need to. Let's get it all clean. That way the RTV has something good to seal against. You're gonna have some trans fluid on there from when we took the valve body off. That's what we want to mainly get off. We just want a clean surface. And we'll come back and clean everything once the pan's up. As far as spraying any of the trans fluid that may have gotten on the frame or the exhaust, we'll clean that off once we're done. Now when you go up, be careful. Remember, you got RTV on the bottom. Whatever you come in contact with, it will smear. Just kind of guide it up. Using bolt holes as a way to line it. Get a couple bolts. Get them started by hand. Just enough to keep the pan where it is. Now I want to go up kind of snug, not a lot, because I've made contact with the RTV against transmission. I don't want to pull it back down and break the seal. It causes the RTV to get a little distorted. So now I'll walk around to the back side and do the same thing and get a couple more bolts started. Now I can go back, start the rest by hand, and then I'll give you a torque spec on getting this pan tightened down like we need. Alright, trans pan's back up, bolts have been snugged up. Final torque on the bolts for the trans pan, excuse me, are 105 inch-pounds. 105 inch-pounds, same torque that we used on the valve body. So just go around the perimeter, tighten them down, and make sure you don't have them over tightened. And then hit it with some brake clean off the exhaust and anything else that got some trans fluid on it. And then we'll go ahead and get the vehicle back on the ground, start adding fluid. Fire the vehicle up and start checking the fluid. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start out with 5 quarts of ATF4. Now it's going to take more, but I'm on the old school chain of thought where I'd rather add than have to take away. So I want to start low and work my way up as the trans temp gets warm and depending on what I need on the stick. Like I said, I want to start with 5. Now when it comes time to check the fluid, you're going to have to do it in neutral. Just so you make sure that's exactly the position you need. Always grab your transmission dipstick. Instructions are usually written on it. This one says idle in neutral. What I like to do is go through all the gears a couple times, put it back in neutral, and then come back here and check the fluid. Now the specs on this particular vehicle says if it's a 2-wheel drive, it will take 5.5 quarts of trans fluid for a service. If it's 4-wheel drive, it would take 6.5. So 6 to 7 quarts is what you're going to need, depending on if it's 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive. Check it while it's warm. Look at the hash marks, make sure you're in the safe area. There's a safe area and then there's a hot area. Just make sure it's within that tolerance and you should be good to go. Now on these transmissions that they are electronic, what's recommended is doing a quick learn. Now a quick learn is a procedure using the scanner. What we do is we go through and it runs a test and calibration of all the solenoids inside the valve body. And what it does is, based on how long it takes for certain things to change position, it can calculate the state of the fluid, and based off of that, give you a softer shift. A lot of times if you replace the fluid, do a service, and drive it afterwards, you might get some harder than normal shifts because everything is still running based off of the calculated formula it had with the older fluid. Quick learn makes it relearn everything, and then you get your softer, smoother shifts. So definitely if you can get that done. Unfortunately, like I said, it requires a scanner, meaning you may have to visit your local dealership, or if the independent shop has a scanner capable of doing that, visiting them as well. Nonetheless, try it, see what you think. If you need the quick learn done, then you know where you need to go. So at this point, this is where I ask for any kind of thumbs up on YouTube. Don't forget you can like me on Facebook, and you can check me out on Instagram and Twitter as well. If you got any comments or suggestions about the video today, or anything Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, or Ram related, please feel free to email me at david@motorcitymechanic.com, and I'll try to get back to you in time and manner. Once again, thanks for always watching these videos.